That is, AI has been trained by a few languages, mainly English, and a handful of dominant cultural contexts. So this risks producing a homogenized worldview, which looks very smooth and efficient, like the chat GPT responses that you always get. It's very smooth and efficient. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That is, the language we speak shapes how we think and perceive reality. If you take Russian language, which has got different expressions of blue, there is light blue, there is dark blue, goluboy or sini, which refers to two different kinds of blue. Losing a language also means losing these alternative maps, which kind of narrows our collective imagination, which is what might be happening to our AI models. I believe, I think I'll give an attempt to try to figure out how to put in cinema in between linguistic language and also AI. So let me start off by talking about, like, I just wanted to explain a fundamental argument that I want to make, which I think some of you have touched upon. Even Pierre Mohammed sir, who spoke just before me, talked about a certain monocultural character of AI. That is, AI has been trained by a few languages, mainly English, and a handful of dominant cultural contexts. So this risks producing a homogenized worldview, which looks very smooth and efficient, like the chat GPT responses that you always get. It's very smooth and efficient, but it's flattened in the perspective of cultural depth. I think this is something that, in a very different context, Shoshana Zuboff, in her wonderful book, Surveillance Capitalism, calls us a tyranny. So let me just, she talks about tyranny in different sense, but let me just misread it or misquote it as the tyranny of AI, this protection of a monocultural character. So we need a certain resistance to this monoculture, and I believe it is where this particular topic assumes an importance. That if you analyze our topic today, it is not a blessing, but rather a blessing in disguise, because I think we have now realized that the kind of the language system in our LLMs and also generative AI tends to be quite homogenized, monocultural. So I think there is an extreme importance to. I mean, there's a need of a resistance to this, which should come from life experiences, affective knowledge, different metaphors, different unique patterns, which are actually embedded in diverse languages, which may not be always mainstream, but largely marginalized. Say, for example, a language which is gone extinct in an island in, say, Andaman. So I think this kind of experience will kind of create or build around this AI, this generative systems, a kind of diversity which could make this more give more possibilities. So, like, for example, I would like to talk about a certain hypothesis as a starting point. I believe most of you would be familiar with the hypothesis, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That is, the language we speak shapes how we think and perceive reality. This is actually a because I'm talking about cinema. This particular hypothesis becomes the fundamental assumption in a very famous science fiction movie which was released in 2016, which is originally a story written by Ted Chiang called "The Story of Our Life." The name of the movie is Arrival. So in this particular movie, you have. So okay, let me before I go into the movie, let me talk about what is Sapir-Whorf hypothesis for those of you who might not have a proper understanding of it. It says that the language we speak shapes how we think and perceive reality. It can rewire the way in which we see the world. And like there are a number of different examples to it. For example, if you take Russian language, which has got different expressions of blue. There is light blue, there is dark blue, goluboy or sini, which refers to two different kinds of blue. Here, a Russian speaker would notice color differences, say a color difference of blue, faster than an English speaker. Or say, for example, take time for that matter. In English, time always travels in a horizontal way. There is after and before. But say in Mandarin, there is up and down. So the perception of time completely goes. Like, for example, take, a word like bridge. In Spanish, the word bridge is masculine. So the bridge is like very sturdy, very strong. But say in German, it is a feminine verb. Sorry, a feminine noun, and then the bridge becomes very beautiful. So the understanding of the very concept of bridge is being shaped by the language in which you are speaking or you are seeing. So the language, every language carries its own map of reality. There is a certain kind of a cartographic imaging involved in every language. So losing a language also means losing these alternative maps, which kind of narrows our collective imagination, which is what might be happening to our AI models. So I was talking about a movie called Arrival. In this particular movie, the premise of the movie is the arrival of certain aliens to Earth, who in the movie is referred as heptapods, who has got a circular language which is non-linear. And it is said that this language, understanding this non-linear language, can itself reshape the human perception of time. That is through language. Like in our language, we can retrieve our past memory. Through this very language, you can retrieve your future memories. So it's not per se time travel, but there is the whole old philosophical idea of predeterminism of language. That is, for example, a writer is writing a poem, a new poem, but the poem is already there in the language. The writer is only figuring out that poem. So that is the idea of predeterminism. If you look at very carefully, I'm not exactly talking about the LLMs, but the generative AIs, which is kind of becoming the norm of the AI, which is like this language system. But there are, of course, small differences where, like, for unlike the heptapods, the aliens, it does not perceive the world differently, but it mirrors the patterns in the data it has been trained on. For example, see, imagine one of us trying to paint, make a small sketch. So we would start with small strokes. You don't have a complete idea of what you're doing, right? So in time, you figure it out. But an AI, a generative AI, which is creating an image, would have completely figured out what it is going to draw. Right. So it has already predicted the future before it has already happened. So what I'm trying to say is that, if AI's training data comes from a very few dominant linguistic worlds, it will produce responses aligned with those worldviews. It can control the future. That's what I'm trying to, say, right? So the only way to give AI a multi-timeline, multi-perspective worldview is to feed it multiple linguistic and cultural inputs. Just as learning the heptapod language expanded the human perception in the movie. That is, the heptapods have arrived here because they know 3,000 years from now, they would require the help of human beings to survive. So they have come here to teach the human beings their language, through it, see the future, and then be of use to them, say 3,000, I believe it is 3,000 years afterwards. Right. So I think the very important word is multilingualism, or linguistic diversity, as the topic says, is certainly the source of, should be the source of identity and creativity and innovation. And to put it into the perspective of cinema, as we know, like cinema, like to take the context of India, I mean, it is produced from almost every language, like at least for 20 languages, cinema is being produced, both mainstream and also, not like the artistic movies which are being produced. And cinema involves language in different forms. For example, the language of cinema itself, but also the language it speaks, the script in which it is written, the subtitling, the dubbing, which is like you see in every movies these days. There are the transcriptions for disabled people, the visually disabled person or auditorily disabled person, the transcriptions. So here, how do you say, for example, you're watching a person from Tamil Nadu, even a person from Tamil Nadu who might know a bit of Kerala culture wouldn't get every reference in a Malayalam movie. Same way, you're watching a Tamil movie, how much ever you are close to a Tamil culture, you wouldn't completely get the context. Say if you're watching a movie like Kumbalangi Nights, there are a lot of verbal cues that are given out or visual cues that are given out, which can only resonate with the culture. I think the wonderful literary example is Vaikom Muhammad Bashir. I think Bashir has been wonderfully translated by Asher, but still, if you don't get, I mean, there are certain cultural moves which are more usually quite difficult for somebody who doesn't understand not just Malayalam language, but the culture of both Malabar and say North Kerala and South Kerala, its difference, and in the context in which Bashir writes. So I think we need to understand how both. I think towards my point, I think cinema has got two-way role. That is, it can benefit from AI and linguistic diversity, but also it can actively help AI become more linguistically diverse. That is, I mean, like cinema is not just a fictional creation, and it's not just fictions. There are wonderful documentaries. There are different kinds of non-fictional productions which can add to the cultural complexity. So, cinema can also become a testing ground for AI's multilingual capacities. And also, cinema can preserve linguistic nuance, right? I'm not doing two examples here, I think, because of the lack of time. And also, a very important thing is cinema can expand AI's emotional understanding or an affective knowledge. Like you using the word mother or amma in Malayalam, say compare it between again. I use the cinema Kumbalangi Nights. I think how the word amma figures in Kumbalangi Nights is quite different to say how the same word would figure in say Satindra is Patir Panjali. I think I think that understanding could cinema could become that platform which could train AI. My last point, my point is that cinema, in that sense, or linguistic diversity, for that sense, becomes a reservoir of resilience. It becomes a kind of a resistance, hence a blessing in disguise. So, in that sense, it can keep our digital futures diverse, emotional, and inventive, right? And also can through it we can retrieve both our memories from our past and also memories from our future.